DOJ has begun a preliminary inquiry into the banking giant's actions. CEO John Stumpf is set to appear before the Senate Banking Committee this morning at 10 a.m. Let's bring in committee member Senator Bob Corker. And yeah, you have an IFB in because we need to talk. So you heard what we were just talking about, Senator.
It was all very helpful. It really enlightened me. Thank you for that discussion.
I'm detecting a hint of sarcasm. So,
no, very helpful.
Reputationally, it's been tough. We need to get to the bottom of it, but Wells Fargo has already paid for this to some extent. No.
$23 billion in share market value. But look, I think there are some legitimate concerns here regarding just internal controls. No doubt some low-income citizens probably had some credit issues that may have affected their ability to do other things, because when credit card accounts and other accounts are opened, it affects that. But look, it's 50 days before an election, and this is the kind of thing that's going to be focused on. But there's no question that there's some legitimate concerns about how a culture like this and an institution that has, been so out there relative to trying to conduct itself like a community bank, how these kinds of issues could have been going on and for so long with so many people within the bank. So I think there are some legitimate concerns here, and hopefully it'll be a constructive meeting, and we'll see.
I'm trying to read between the lines of what you're saying, Senator. So you seem to be kind of indicating you think it's being demagogued a little because of the election, and it's a little bit over the top compared to what the bank actually did. Is that your take?
Well, I think there's going to be a whole range. I think, you look at this executive, Ms. Tolstead, which was in charge of this, who apparently was a workaholic. And, there was an account today in the Wall Street Journal about her signing leases. I mean, was very, very micro-focused. And yet at the same time, systemically, there was something happening within the bank. And I think it will raise some legitimate questions about the size of these institutions, their ability to ensure that the culture is throughout. On the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, there'll be folks, I'm sure, that want a banker's head on the end of a stick. And so, there'll be a wide range, I would guess, of tone and questions today. But I do applaud the chairman of the committee for calling the hearing, and hopefully it'll be constructive. There's also questions about what role the regulators played. Was this really something that an LA Times reporter, figured out was occurring, or did our folks that are involved in regulating these institutions actually play a role? So we'll see.
You combine some of these other recent corporate stores like Milan and stuff, and you bring it all back to corporate compensation. Mm-hmm. And then I was making the case the other day that no, it's got to be based on performance. That's how you got to tie corporate CEO pay to performance. Okay, let's do earnings per share. Okay, and then you do that for a while. It's like, wait a minute, they're doing all this stuff for earnings per share, and they're doing. Let's make it on revenue. Oh no, wait a minute. Now they got these salespeople. So how do you win on this? How do you do? Maybe you're right, Jack. Maybe it should be customer satisfaction. Maybe it should be average wage gain at the company. Maybe I don't know what you do CEO compensation on now, Senator.
Look, I don't know. I will say that you and I both, all of us on this set, Jack certainly has dealt with this through the years, but I think there are issues sometimes in large institutions where you have people who on one hand are micromanaging details and yet don't have their head up sometimes at the 10,000-foot level, looking at culture. And again, for this to go on for 4 years and to affect so many people, it is kind of interesting that internal controls didn't red flag what was happening here. But again, it's our job to oversee and to make sure that appropriately institutions that are especially large and complex like this are properly regulated. And a lot is being made out of this, and in some cases there's some reality to that, but we'll see. I think it ought to be hopefully a constructive hearing.
Right. Senator, you made a quick comment about the LA Times versus perhaps the Consumer Protection Bureau in terms of who discovered this. How important is that ultimately? And, you've heard probably from Democrats who've said this situation, this episode at Wells Fargo is an example of why that agency is needed. Do you agree?
Well, I think we do need to have legitimate consumer protection, and you know, Republicans, I know it's going to get into that, no question. The Republicans certainly support that. I think that having a 5-member board or a commission as part of this is something that would be an important governance structure, and it being subject to appropriations from Congress would be a legitimate effort, but I don't think any of those things would have negatively impacted here. It's hard to determine at present, and I'm saying this, I don't know, hopefully the hearing will shed light, whether this is something, again, that a reporter uncovered, and the Consumer Protection just came in with a vacuum cleaner to you know, vacuum up you know, $100 million in fines or whatever it was, or whether they actually played a role. Either way, something happened here, and it was inappropriate, and probably, which is especially bad, some low-income citizens were negatively affected, and you know, those are things that we need to protect against, and again, I hope we have a very constructive hearing.
Jack?
I agree with everything you said this morning, Senator, but I'd like to challenge you a little bit on the never-Trumpers. I'd like you to get out there and put the policies of the Republican Party in this election going forward against the Democratic policies, and really talk about why we need a Republican victory in the White House. Because I think it's a binary choice.
Yeah.
We don't have 4 other people to pick from. It's a binary choice, and I hope you will be, with your articulate behavior that always seems to make the case in the right way, get out there and work against the never-Trumpers, or bring some of them on board with the realization that we need these tax policies, these regulatory reforms, these terrorist issues. We need a Supreme Court. We need all of these things, and to stop the never-Trump train for Republicans. It's just crazy.
Well, my staff tells me you've been doing an outstanding job of that this morning, but look, I do think at the end of the day, more and more people will understand there is in fact a large policy difference between the two that affect our country in very divergent ways, and I think over the next period of time, especially after we're out of here, more and more people will be talking about that. But I know you and Susie are out there actively doing this, and I appreciate you saying
Senator,
that. So,
help us, though, square up your support for Trump to the extent that you are supporting him with your critical comments that you've been making for quite some time as the head of the Foreign Relations Committee about Russia and Putin, and Trump's comments about Putin, which seem to be much more supportive.
You know, Andrew, I ran for public office as a business person 9.5 years ago. I, came into the Senate. I think a lot of times when people run for public office, they don't really sometimes fully understand some of the nuance that goes with this, some of the alliances that we've had for 70 years or so in Europe. And when they get here, they realize sometimes things are somewhat different, and there's maybe a little bit more nuance to what happens in public policy. I know that was the case for me. I've been here 9.5 years, and so what I've chosen to do is when I hear comments that, maybe are not taking into account some of those things, I try to, with my public comments, lead a bread trail to the extent I have the ability to do that, to a different place. And so, for instance, is it isolationism that's being proposed, or is it more a foreign policy that focuses on realism, much like the great Jim Baker led when he was Secretary of State? So, again, I think there's ways of taking comments and making, adding some nuance to them, which is helpful in this debate. And that's the route that I've chosen to take here, and hopefully in some way it's been helpful. I just want to see good things happen for our country. I really do, and this is a great nation. We obviously are dealing with great difficulties right now in many areas, all of which can be overcome. But I feel my role here as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, where I work with people on both sides of the aisle, is at the end of the day to help lead us to a place where our country is doing those things that are truly in our national interest.
All right, Senator Corker, thanks so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to be with you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.